Hello YouTube, how's it going? DAT Simplified here. Today we're going to be talking about developmental biology and some of the most important things that you need to know about developmental biology for your upcoming DAT. So let's get started. So when we talk about developmental biology, it's the process in which an embryo, a zygote develops into an embryo and then finally becomes a fetus. So in developmental biology, we have five main steps and they are going to be as follows. First one is going to be cleavage. This is basically when the cells divide. We have four types of cleavage that occur in developmental biology, and they are dependent on what creature we're talking about. So the first one is going to be radial, also known as indeterminate. Basically here you have vertical division, and the main reason it's called indeterminate is that if this occurs in a very, very early stage of development and you have two different, you slice off the zygote into two different pieces, you're going to have those two pieces can actually develop and become two different creatures. So you're going to have two viable embryos. So indeterminate, the cell's fate has not been yet determined, so you can still have two viable embryos if cleavage happens at an early stage. This is how we get, this occurs in humans. This is sometimes how you get twins. And yeah, so vertical here, vertical. This is a characteristic of all deuterostomes. So deuterostomes, for those who don't know, deuterostomes are animals slash creatures that have their blastula develop into an anus first. So anus here I'm gonna write. Okay, so now we talked about the first type. The second type is gonna be our spiral slash determinant. And here, as it says spiral, we're gonna have spiral division, and it's the opposite. It's the exact opposite of this. So determined, if you have the embryo slice or the zygote slice at an early stage of development, both pieces are gonna die. They're not gonna develop into a viable embryo. So this is a characteristic of protostomes. Here I'm gonna say the blastula develops into the mouth first. So here we have example humans. Here I'm going to say insects, let's say. Alright, so now we talked about these. Now we can go on to the next type of cleavage, and that is holoblastic. So holoblastic is the type of division where you have division throughout the entire embryo. It's not just limited to certain parts of the embryo, it's throughout the whole thing. And this causes even division in the embryo. So this happens with animals that have little to no yolk. However, there is an exception to this rule, and that is frogs. Frogs, they have a lot of yolk, however, they do holoblastic division. And so on the DAT, they love to ask about this. So please know that frogs are an exception to this rule. They have a lot of yolk, however, they still do holoblastic division. And finally, the last one that we have is going to be meroblastic division. And this is partial division, happens with animals that have a lot of yolk. And so, since it's partial, it's not the entire embryo is going to be affected by division. And so, examples of this include birds, reptiles, and fish. And here, for holoblastic, humans are we do holoblastic. So humans, they do this and they do this. Okay, so now we've talked about cleavage. Now we can go on to number 2, which is the morula. This is going to be your 12 to 16 cell stage. And this is also known as the stage where you have a ball of blastomeres. And now we have number 3, and that is going to be your blastula. So that's your 128 cell stage. And this is also known as the hollow cavity. When you have a hollow cavity stage, this is called the blastula. So now we're on number 4, and that is the blastocyst. This is the stage where the blastula cells divide and differentiate, and they give you 2 important structures that I'm going to talk about. So blastula cells divide, and they're going to give you these 2 things. So the first thing they're going to give you is trophoblast. Actually, let me use a different. I'm fine with this color actually. Trophoblast. And basically, this is an outer ring of cells that most importantly, what it does, it implants the embryo onto the uterus, and also it gives rise to the 4 extra embryonic structures, which is a good time to talk about actually. 4 extra embryonic. So now we have the 4 extra embryonic structures. They are going to be as follows. The first one is going to be your amnion. And that is going to be your innermost layer. That's going to be the water/fluid-like cushion that cushions the embryo. So that's number 1. Number 2 is the chorion, and that is your outermost. So amnion innermost, chorion is your outermost. It's going to be your outermost layer that connects to the placenta, since it's the outermost, and it's responsible for gas exchange and for nutrient exchange as well. So now we've talked about these 2. Now let's go on to number 3, and that's going to be your allantosis. So that one is going to be responsible for storing waste for disposal. So we have number 4, and that's going to be your yolk sac. And what that's going to do is that it's going to provide nutrients to the developing embryo. So now we've talked about the trophoblast and everything you need to know about the trophoblast. Now let's go on and talk about the inner cell mass, also known as ICM. Inner cell mass. So this is what really forms the embryo. And if we really want to get technical about it, there are 2 parts about the ICM that the DAT also can ask you about. And they're going to be as follows. You're going to have, I didn't write embryo here. Forms embryo. And they're going to be as follows. You're going to have the epiblast. So that's the portion of the ICM that contributes to the main embryo. And you have the hypoblast. And so the hypoblast gives partial contribution to the yolk sac. So partial contribution. So this epiblast is the main contribution, and hypoblast is, you can tell from the name, hypo, low, so low contribution. So now we've done all of this. Now we're on the 5th and final stage, and that is going to be your gastrulation. Gastrulation is the stage in which the the embryo develops and you get a triploblast. You develop into 3 distinctive layers. So you get a triploblast. And so with gastrulation, you're gonna get your ectoderm, you're gonna get your mesoderm, you're gonna get your endoderm. So ectoderm, mesoderm, and endoderm. Okay, so now with these, each one of these structures is going to give rise to different parts of the body. So the ectoderm is going to give rise to the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system, so CNS plus PNS. It's also going to give rise to the ears, the eyes, the nose, the epidermis, the mammary glands, and for dentists, it's going to give rise to the enamel and the adrenal medulla. Alright, so now we've talked about the ectoderm. Now let's talk about the mesoderm. The mesoderm, it's going to basically involve structure. It's going to develop into the structural things, so like bones, muscles, things that allow us to move. So bones, muscles. Also, it's going to develop into the cardiovascular system, so cardio. It's also going to give you the spleen plus notochord. And finally, it's going to give rise to the adrenal cortex. Now, I know it might seem kind of confusing here that sometimes you might confuse the two. You might think that adrenal medulla forms in the mesoderm. The way I have it memorized is that adrenal, see how here we start with an M and the M here? M's cannot go together. So adrenal medulla, it's going to go with the ectoderm. It's not going to go with the mesoderm. So this is just a small tip to help you memorize it and get used to it. So now we have the last stage, the last part of the gastrulation, which is the endoderm. And the endoderm, basically it forms your digestive tract, so the epithelial lining of your digestive system. It's going to also form the respiratory system, so your lungs, and it's also going to form your excretory system, so your kidneys. And finally, it's going to give rise to the pancreas, so P-L-T-T, pancreas, liver, thymus, thyroid. This is thymus. And this is thyroid. And that's all you guys need to know for part 1 about developmental biology. Next videos I'm going to talk about the different types of cells, TPM, totipotent, pluripotent, and multipotent, and I'll talk more about the frog exception here, how we talked about the frogs being an exception to holoblastic. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please let me know if it was helpful. And if you guys have any questions, please leave them down in the comments. I'll be more than happy to answer them. Good luck studying for your DAT and have a great day. Goodbye.